I'm excited to be here. It's the first reading I've done in a long time. And it was good to be asked to write something special for the occasion. And I guess when I received the email about 6 weeks ago asking me, it was that night in my writing group that I started this story. And as it happened, I'd been reading something that day that appeared in the story, but has since been edited out, as well as some other influences. One influence remains, and you'll probably be able to tell, because the writer is quoted. So this is about half of the story. I don't usually write short stories, but it's kind of fun. And it's called The Visitor, I think. So here we go. It was always evening, or shall I say always the blue of twilight, when I arrived at the Trinity Hills after my long drive. And it took a good 7 hours of prairie before reaching the mountains. The friendly, quiet slopes, actually that was the quiet yet friendly slopes, encompassed my little Fiat, and the autumn sunset would soon be behind me. My breath deepened and my eyes widened, despite their fatigue from the hours of following worn double yellow lines, watching small-town turnoffs and truckers' back flaps. In the twilight blues, my ritual was to stop by Ruby Lake and watch reflections of the last passing clouds, ripples in the current from end-of-day ghosts. I would never wear a jacket and stood with the wind ripping my shirt. The sting of air after hours of confinement felt reassuring and familiar. The wind was always the first hint that my time in the mountains would take me places that I could never imagine while wandering crowded city streets. I was ready to begin my sojourn in earnest, ready to risk what my time away would require, whether of a physical nature or more contemplative. For the last hour of driving, when darkness came, I made myself sing, slapped my cheeks, drank old coffee to keep my acumen for the last 30 miles of snaking curves. With morning came the first moist air, the song of the larks, and joyful howls of coyotes greeting members of their pack. The fire would need to be made, and I would have to prepare for my first visitor. But I liked to stay in bed and shrug my shoulders, circle my ankles, and wiggle my spine, as if I was a mole coming out of a long, dark tunnel. At the window, observing the dry grasses and a small rabbit, I wondered who the visitor would be this time, as there was always somebody who came, never the same one. And I was never ready, because at this point I craved solitude so much it hurt. Yet as I curled up on the sofa with my old shiny silk robe draping over my warm woolens and with the bright fire busting the logs, in time curiosity would build, and I would jump over to the window and take a look up to the road. Stripped of the excess contact that comes with the multitudes, the daily parades of noise, the violent horn blasts on corners, the scary white behemoths on wheels, and the hungry street people's pleas, stripped from the high-strung electric wattage, stripped down to just me in a kerosene-lit cabin miles away from anyone or anywhere. It was here, oddly enough, that I could admit I was a woman who needed others, needed hours of conversation and warm repasts of special roasted meats and steamed greens. It was here I could see at last how precious any contact, any at all, could be. And it was here, as fate would have it, that people, I suppose you could call them that, came to me. Always a variety, and I wondered who would come today. Yes, they must have been human, but it was a game I liked to play with myself, to imagine them like ghosts, as they never seemed quite solid, as if I could stick my fist straight through their membranes and into their gullet. Surely there was some kind of survivalist community they hailed from higher in the mountains. Perhaps 100 folk who had decided to live apart from humanity and protect themselves from disasters. Perhaps they believed in the visions of Edward Casey or a coming economic collapse. Hadn't that been hinted at? I couldn't recall. One topic we had never broached. The visitors arrived solo, no vehicle, and always brought a few tasty things plucked from what I took to be their doomsday garden. A garden planted within a circle of native wilds, one from which they harvested white beans, oats, comfrey leaves, walnuts, and plump blackberries. I look forward to receiving a bounty today to liven up my pantry. I'm here. The call came right alongside a quick shuffle on the gravel road, and it was good to hear the voice. A rather small one, I think, a child's, even on this first day. It was good because at times the silence of the mountain was so thorough that it could make me forget noise even existed. Silence and evening undertow that took me places without air or light and only more questions, a place perfect for envelopment by two book covers. But it was also a sledgehammer, silence with nowhere screaming at its very center. I could only try to be grateful that the quiet whacked at my heavy skull and not my heart. It continued to pump what was life-giving and enduring. The girl wore boy's pants and a thermal white cotton shirt. She reminded me of a caricature of childhood, all eyes and head with a skinny neck. "Come in," I said, as I opened the door. "My name is Katia." She didn't answer and stared at me with those eyes that pooled in her large, doll-like head, eyes framed by shiny hair that split on the top and rained down on her shoulders. The girl, maybe 10 years old, walked straight to my couch and sat down. For some reason, it had never occurred to me that there were other occupants of the cabin when I didn't inhabit it, but it was clear the girl had visited before and knew the cabin well. I was going through a phase where youth itself made me ache, not exactly with regret, but with the weight of my long life, which had become more and more a burden as it piled up and suffocated me when I couldn't sleep. The child's creamy, unmarked cheeks made me remember my youth, a time when I believed everything existed in one unified tapestry, from grieving war widows to the majestic pillars of the Parthenon. At home, I worked with new technologies daily and saw their possibilities. When grappling with a stringy, elegant bit of code, I could disappear for hours into a future of relevance. I was nearing the last third of my life, had set my past aside. Yet here was a child staring at me. No, she wasn't staring at me. She was staring at the wall across from the couch, but it felt as if her eyes might pierce my chest, as if she could break a rib and stick her little blackberry-stained fingers right inside me to twist my arteries into knots. Will the dominators always become the dominated? I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about the Romans. Silence. Why did she just come if just to taunt me with more silence? "What is your name?" I asked. "Stefan." It fit, the serious sound, a royal title. "Stefan," I repeated. "Isn't that Slavic, a Serbian prince's name, if I recall?" "Flotsam," she replied, and tilted her head up as if she was smelling something wafting over us, and then she turned away to look. "Flotsam?" I laughed, stood up and paced around the wreck. "The oceanic kind? I can't seem to stop asking questions. Am I scaring you? I have another." Stefan turned those big eyes away from the wall and onto me. "Do you think it's philosophy or science that has guided the direction of history?" I asked. "Or is it actually what Spinoza called the human sentiments, the negative ones, such as fear or greed, jealousy, the love of power?" "We think it is the latter," Stefan replied, her voice certain and deep. "Human baseness, then? Isaiah Berlin thought the horrors of the 20th century were caused by ideas. That's a lot to put only on the shoulders of ideas, but he did. He didn't believe we could blame the evils embedded in human nature for our wars and horrors. Yet you say you disagree. Your entire community disagrees. You're all in agreement about your disagreement?" Yes. She walked to the bowl on the counter, took one blackberry from the batch she had brought me, and slowly rolled it around in her mouth, while I continued to pace. Don't know what I think, I said. Who can go back and look inside the minds and bodies of those who've wreaked havoc? We can, in a way, she replied and smiled. What do you mean? I stopped pacing. We've met lots of people from the past. She shrugged her shoulders and made a funny clicking sound after piercing her lips together, as if to say it was no big deal. Right. I was not at all pleased to think that her mountain community thought they were in contact with people from the past. I had no interest whatsoever in occult fantasies or delusional beliefs. You're not going to tell me you time travel or something like that? No, she shook her head. No? No, it's not like that. People from long ago have come to us. Why, I asked. It was then she started to sing, in that dreadful Eastern European throaty two-toned manner. I'd always envied singers as I sang like a bat without any ability to follow a tune. But to my surprise, I joined her. It kind of slipped out. Stefan walked outside of the cabin, and I followed her into the meadow directly adjacent, where we soon became surrounded by Douglas firs and high ponderosas. The sharp, piney smell was enough to make me high. She tilted her head back and reminded me of a bird, and like a bird, she had no words, only song.